Imagine being born into a world of luxury, privilege, and wealth, yet you can't experience the simple joy of walking. That was the reality for Jason, the heir to one of the wealthiest families in the country. His life was full of expensive toys, massive mansions, and unimaginable wealth, but there was one thing money couldn't buy: the ability to walk. But everything was about to change, and no one saw it coming, not even Jason himself. If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this one. Jason Williams was born into a life many could only dream of. His family, the Williams family, controlled massive businesses and held influence in nearly every industry you could think of. They lived in a mansion so large it had wings with names. But despite all the riches, Jason's life had always been limited. A car accident as a child left him paralyzed from the waist down. Though doctors had done their best, the prognosis was grim. He would never walk again. Jason's parents, Robert and Eliza Williams, were devastated, but they did everything in their power to make sure Jason lacked for nothing. From the latest tech gadgets to private tutors, they spared no expense to ensure he had the best of everything, except for what he truly needed: a chance at independence, freedom, and the ability to walk again. Enter Tanya, the new maid. A Black woman in her early 30s, Tanya had no idea that her new job would change everything. Born into a humble background, Tanya worked her way up from difficult beginnings. She wasn't intimidated by the grandeur of the Williams estate. She'd seen it all before: the lavish wealth, the perfect facades, but none of that mattered to her. What did matter was doing her job well and making a difference where she could. When Tanya was hired, she didn't know about the struggles Jason faced daily. The house was enormous, and she was assigned to cleaning various rooms, including Jason's. She quickly noticed how Jason, despite having everything anyone could dream of, seemed trapped inside his own body, bound to a wheelchair that had become his cage. At first, Tanya kept her distance. Jason was used to being surrounded by staff, but he rarely interacted with anyone beyond essential services they provided. The Williams family staff was mostly there to clean, cook, and take care of the property, and Jason had never shown much interest in socializing with them. He wasn't rude, just distant, frustrated by his limitations and the sense of helplessness he had carried for years. But Tanya wasn't like the others. Unlike the rest of the staff who treated Jason as a child, Tanya spoke to him with respect, like he was a person, not just a problem to be solved. Slowly, Jason began to open up to her. She would often chat with him while she cleaned, talking about her day, sharing stories of her childhood, and even asking him about his interests. Over time, their conversations grew more personal. One day, as Tanya was dusting the bookshelves in Jason's room, she noticed an old photo album on the shelf. She picked it up and opened it, flipping through pictures of a much younger Jason. In one photo, he was standing with his parents, smiling wide and holding a soccer ball, looking like a typical boy with big dreams. Tanya was struck by the contrast between that boy full of life and the man in the wheelchair she saw before her. She said softly, "I bet you were a great soccer player, huh?" Jason gave a bitter laugh. "Yeah, I was. Until I wasn't." Tanya smiled gently. "You know, I think you can still be great in your own way. It's not over yet." Jason looked at her, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "You think I can just get up and walk again?" Tanya paused, not fully sure what to say. "I don't know about walking, but I do know that sometimes the right person can help you see things in a different way." Jason didn't know it yet, but Tanya's words were the spark that would ignite a change in both of them. Over the next few weeks, Tanya continued working at the estate, always maintaining her friendly attitude and engaging with Jason. But she started noticing something. Despite all the money spent on therapists, doctors, and treatments, there was something missing. Jason had resigned himself to his situation, trapped in a cycle of therapy that never seemed to get him closer to walking. The staff, including the therapists, kept telling Jason that there was nothing more they could do, that his injury was permanent. His parents, though loving, believed that money could fix anything. They didn't understand that Jason needed more than physical therapy. He needed a change in mindset, a way to overcome the mental barriers that had been built over years of disappointment. But Tanya was different. She didn't have a medical degree or fancy certifications, but she knew something those with degrees didn't. She knew that the mind and the body were connected in ways science couldn't always explain. Tanya had seen people in her life, people from the toughest situations, defy all odds simply by believing in themselves and being surrounded by people who believed in them. One evening, as Tanya was cleaning the living room, she overheard a conversation between Robert and Eliza. They were discussing a new round of expensive treatments for Jason, and the frustration in their voices was palpable. "None of this is working," Robert said angrily. "We're throwing money at a problem we can't fix." Tanya, who had been listening quietly, approached them. "I might have an idea, but it's unconventional." Eliza looked at her curiously. "What do you mean?" "I believe Jason needs someone who's going to push him, not just physically, but mentally. Someone who's going to show him that there's still hope, that he's not broken." Robert laughed dryly. "And you think you're the person to do that?" Tanya, undeterred, nodded. "I do." Tanya's approach wasn't easy. She had no experience as a therapist, but she used her background in sports and her natural empathy to craft an approach that focused on both Jason's mind and body. She encouraged him to try small exercises, something he hadn't done in years. At first, he resisted, frustrated by the lack of progress. But Tanya was persistent. She'd spent enough time with him to understand his pain, and more importantly, his desire for independence. It started with small steps. Tanya would ask him to use his arms to lift himself from his chair, something he thought was impossible. Then, she encouraged him to try standing with assistance. Each time he succeeded, no matter how small, Tanya celebrated it with him. She told him that it was the small victories that would lead to something greater. Slowly but surely, Jason began to believe her. He had grown accustomed to failure, but Tanya's encouragement was different. The moment of truth came one morning when Tanya gently asked, "What if you stood up on your own today, just for a second?" Jason looked at her, his heart racing. "What if I fall?" Tanya smiled. "You won't fall. Not with me here. Just trust yourself." For the first time in years, Jason decided to try. With Tanya's help, he pushed himself up from his chair. The room went silent. He stood, wobbling at first, then steadied himself. He couldn't believe it. He was standing. It wasn't perfect, but it was a miracle. The impossible had become possible. The news of Jason's progress spread quickly through the estate. Robert and Eliza were astounded. They hadn't seen their son stand in years, let alone try to walk. They began to realize that Tanya wasn't just another maid. She was the one who had opened Jason's eyes to the possibility of change. Jason's life transformed. It wasn't an easy road, and he didn't suddenly start running marathons. But with Tanya by his side, he began to push further each day. He started to regain his confidence and independence. With the support of his parents and Tanya, Jason committed to a rigorous physical therapy program, one that focused on both his physical and mental strength. Jason's story became an inspiration to many. He went from being a wealthy, isolated man in a wheelchair to someone who proved that the human spirit could overcome even the greatest of obstacles. Jason's journey from despair to hope was made possible by one person who saw beyond his wealth, beyond his disability, and believed in the impossible. Tanya wasn't just a maid, she was the catalyst for his transformation. And in doing so, she changed his life forever. If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, hit that like button and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this one. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with friends, and don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss an update. Stay tuned, more surprises are coming.